Hello, folks. Are we here? Are we all here? A very wonderful evening to you all. Let's see. Actually, this light can be a little less like that. There we go. I always end up not having the best light, but how and ever. Oh, that's not bad. That's not bad. There we go. Hi, folks. How's it going? You're all very welcome to the live stream, the COVID-19 lockdown live stream. It's a bizarre world we're living in right now, and yeah, we're just seeing how it all works, isn't it? It's quite bizarre. Yeah, so you're all very welcome here. Usually, these live streams are open live. No, they're live, but they're usually open to Patreon supporters. If you wish to become a Patreon supporter, you can at patreon.com/John D. Ruddy. And usually the live access is given to Patreon supporters. And then I post up these. Then I post up these onto my channel afterwards, but you can't interact. But given that half the planet is on lockdown at the moment, I thought I would open this up a little bit to my subscribers here and see how we do. So, how are we all surviving? Let's see how we're doing. Oh, some Russian. Unfortunately, I don't speak Russian. Yes, exactly. Can you please make a video on Khmer Rouge? Please. Yeah, that is. It's on the very long list of videos that I have. Well, I mean, I touched on it in the Vietnam War video, but obviously there's a lot more to go into with the Khmer Rouge. Very dark, very, very, very dark part in history. But yeah, no, I definitely want to look into something like that. Let's see. Hello from Cape Cod. Wow. I've never been to Cape Cod. That's Massachusetts, is it? MA? Massachusetts? Cape Cod. I have a map of the world right in front of me here, but it's not. I think it is. I've been to Massachusetts. I've been to Boston for a couple of hours. I was staying in Rhode Island. That was many years ago now, but I was staying in Rhode Island, and we did a little road trip up to Boston. And I had some clam chowder, and it was delicious. I had some root beer and clam chowder in Cheers, and not the Cheers, because there are two different Cheerses in Boston. There's the Cheers that resembles the interior of Cheers, and then there is the actual Cheers bar, which is what they use for the outside. And for anyone who doesn't know, they're like, Cheers? What's Cheers? What's Cheers? Cheers was a massive sitcom in the 80s. And yeah, it's one thing that loads of tourists are like, hey, we're in Boston, let's go to Cheers. The clam chowder was particularly good, and I love a good seafood chowder, so that was nice. It's chowder. Say it right. I'll try and say it right. I'm still trying to get my different New England accents, because it's similar to New York, but it's different, and I do know it's different. Can you do a history of the Mongols? Hello from Canada. Hello, Canada. Yes, I'll put it on the list. The next video, to give you a little update. Oh, let's see. Hi from Limerick. My son absolutely loves your Manny Man books and wants to write you a letter to encourage you to publish a book on World War I and World War II, as he thoroughly enjoyed your videos. My son is 8. Can you please tell your son to tell my publishers that? because I would love to write books on World War One and World War Two, and loads of, essentially, I'd love to cover all of the topics that I have done in videos so far, but obviously the books would have a lot more detail on them, because like an average script for one of my history videos would be about 2,000 words ish, but one of my books, I think, comes in about kind of 10,000 words, I think. Let's see. Do you think it dumb that the party that won the popular vote doesn't get to form a government over there in Ireland? Aha, politically charged questions. I love it. Well, I mean, it's an interesting one. Like, obviously, the whole coronavirus pandemic kind of puts a lot of politics to the side, or at least it should put a lot of politics to the side, as long as, you know, your government is being responsible and doing things in the best interest of the people of the country and not in their own best interests. Yeah, it's kind of bizarre that we still don't have, like, we still have a caretaker government as opposed to a full-on actual government running the place. So for anyone who doesn't know, we had a very revolutionary election. When was it? No, was it February? It seems like so long ago, back when we were living in simpler times. But yeah, we had an election where, because usually since Irish independence, it has always either been some form of Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael, and it'll either be Fianna Fáil in government or Fine Gael in government, or Fianna Fáil, or, I mean, if you want to be very technical, you could also say Common and Gael, but they evolved into what became Fine Gael. But this time, it was essentially a 20-20-20 split of between Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, and Sinn Féin, who have been coming up in the polls. Essentially, a lot of Irish people, particularly a lot of young Irish people, just want change, and want change from decades of more of the same. And I suppose, you know, it's arguably some of the same reasons why people voted for Trump, some of the same reasons people voted for Brexit. You know, people are just sick of status quo. But at the same time, like, that's what happens if you're offering more of the same, and if people's normal is terrible, then they're going to vote for something else, regardless of what that something else is. You know, so excuse me. Oh, a cough. Let's see where that goes, eh? But yeah, so Sinn Féin, I think I can't even remember all of the specific figures now, but they won the popular vote. Yeah, I think they did, just about. But nobody had the numbers to create a complete majority. And even for if Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael were to join forces, they would still be 40% roughly. So, you know, I think some people are still kind of looking at it going, would it be Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, and the Green Party, which could make up a government, which would result Sinn Féin being the chief opposition, which was something that they managed to swindle, that Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael managed to swindle, that it wasn't the case in the last election. But it's wonderfully complicated. But I think everybody has put some politics to the side, and rightly so, because we have bigger fish to fry at the moment. That fish being COVID-19. Flatten the curve. Are we all washing our hands, by the way? I hope so. Do the English Civil War. I would love to do the English Civil War. The English Civil War would be a really cool video to do. That is from, who's that from? That's from Luke T. The English Civil War would be, yeah. Well, I suppose you can see, oh, actually, my microphone is blocking him. There he is. He's always behind me. Oliver Cromwell. He's always sitting in the background of my office. He cracks the whip because he had a wonderfully lasting effect on Ireland as well. But it's funny, we actually have a little moment in my play, Manny Man Does the History of Ireland, on stage, where I start explaining about the English Civil War, and it's like Oliver Cromwell eventually took control of England and had the King of England executed. And Oppie, the other character, is like, so if he kills the King of England, then surely that's good news for Ireland. And it's like, not exactly. Oh, the joys of wars. Can you please do the 7 Years' War? There are quite a few 7 Years' War. Which one are you talking about in particular? Chrono Say is going to make some soup. What kind of soup, Chrono Say? Thank you very much, Mohammed Al. Thank you very much. I am keeping safe. Let's see. Hey John, have you heard the news about my country, Brazil? The president is saying that we should end the quarantine, and he said he is too good to get a flu. I have not heard a lot of news coming from Brazil at the moment. He does know that this isn't the flu. He does realize that that coronavirus is a different virus to influenza. You know, I mean, they're similar. They're both kind of respiratory diseases, but they are different. I mean, sure, Donald Trump's chatting the same as well, where he's looking about opening things back up for Easter, and like having churches packed at Easter. It's like, that's a good idea. Like, it's funny because I mean, I like in my last stream only a month ago, I was downplaying coronavirus. Like so many of us completely underestimated just where this would go. And I myself was one of them. But I think that's something that we all need to be very careful of, is that when all of this is over, that we don't just instantly repopulate everywhere where we weren't allowed to go, because the virus will still be floating about. And if, you know, one day we're quarantined and the next day everyone's like, let's go to the beach and jam the beach, then you'll find that the virus will jump about again. Now, obviously, I mean, we can't be a complete slave to this virus either, but I mean, we kind of have to be if we want our health service to not collapse. Let's see, bro, it's not a flu. It's worse. People are suffering in my country. Even retired nurses don their uniforms and become volunteers in Malaysia. Yeah. I mean, like, I have the utmost respect for healthcare workers, all healthcare workers. My wife is a nurse, and I just have the massivest respect for what they do. You know, like there was, who was it? It was here I am touching my face. I have washed my hands before this, I've been in my house for weeks now. Which one? It was a politician, one of the Republicans in the States, who was suggesting that if they pay the unemployed too much, then people are going to be incentivized to not do their jobs, and he's suggesting that there are loads of nurses out there who will go and get unemployment because it'd be better. First of all, pay your nurses more. Second of all, do you really think that people are like, oh, brilliant, I don't have to do my job anymore? Like, there are a lot of people who get into healthcare not just on a well, that is a job to do, but there are a lot of people who go, it's health care, people care, and people care about their job, and people are going in despite the danger, despite the craziness. And so hats off to you. It's amazing. I'm in Michigan. We have over 3,600 cases and 92 deaths in the state of Michigan. Yeah, it's up at Lifford. Hey, Lifford. Yeah, it's scary. It really is. And I'll be very honest, I'm very worried about the United States in particular. Partially because your president isn't handling this well. He's, this is really showing, and the same on the other side of the water with Boris Johnson, who has COVID-19 now, along with half his cabinet. But it's a crisis like this that really shows them up for the chancers that they are. And I would sit back and enjoy it with popcorn if it weren't for the fact that people are dying because of it. But this is what happens when you elect a chancellor, and for anyone who if I'm not sure how commonly used chancellor is, at least over on the States, but like a shyster, a huckster, a chancer, they'll chance their arm, they'll chance it. They'll be like, it'll be fine, I can do that. Are you sure you can do that? Yeah, of course I can. Let's see. Long live the Queen. She's immortal, I tell you, mate. Well, she better stay away from her son Charles. Like, it's sirloin of, what is that? Sirloin of ice? Didn't Ireland have a weird relationship with the Nazis during World War II? Weirder than most. I mean, it's something actually I'd love to go into more detail sometime in a video about Ireland during World War II, or as we call it, the emergency. Like, it wasn't even a full-on. It wasn't. It wasn't World War II for us. It was the emergency. I say we. I mean, I wasn't there, but we as a nation. Ireland was only recently, only a couple of years, like 1937 was when we kind of became separated from the British Commonwealth, and so they couldn't kind of call the banners of us to come join. And I think particularly Eamon de Valera, who was in charge at the time, I think he was very hesitant about fighting alongside Britain, even though in hindsight, it wasn't necessarily the best of like, where it's like we went, the Western world went off to fight the Nazis, and Ireland sat it out. They said, no, we don't want to get a part of this, but I think hindsight kind of is 2020. Yeah, I mean, it was kind of ill-advised. Although there is the thing of Eamon de Valera went to Germany to sign a book of condolences for Hitler after he died. I think as a real formality, going, well, I am not showing my sides here, so I am going to go there as a national leader to go and condole or whatever the word is, this other national leader. But of course, history has shown that to be not one of the finest moments. Let's see, Martin Rodriguez. Could you do a video about Eastern Europe in the interwar period? I feel this would be great because it was a mess after World War One, and I need to find what exactly happened during that messy time. Yeah. One thing I find fascinating is how Poland shifted miles and miles and miles to which direction? It shifted miles and miles to the west. After World War One, it was further east than it is now, and it reached into what is now, I think, parts of like Belarus and Ukraine, I think, or maybe bits of Lithuania as well. I'm not sure, but it pushed over that way, and part of what is now Western. I'm terrible with my East and West. I always have to think, but part of what is now Western Poland used to be part of Germany. But of course, Germany shrunk after World War II, but also Poland. So Poland gained loads of that land that Germany used to be part of Germany, but it also lost land to Soviet powers. But it's bizarre, like when you look at it between one year and the next, and it actually shifts to the west. It's really weird. I find it very strange how countries can change in shape so much. I think because we have such a set shape in Ireland, because we are an island. And yeah, we have the Northern Ireland border, but the shape is set in stone, shall we say, even though, I mean, it is slowly being eroded by the oceans over time. But, for as long as we're here and for as long as generations and generations are here, it'll look roughly the same. But I find it bizarre how you get some countries that used to stretch much, like Austria, for example. Like Austria, I think, incorporated like Kiev, went over as far as Kiev once. But even if you look at the Austro-Hungarian Empire, it was huge. And it engulfed so much of Southeast Europe. Let's see. How much information is there on the Limerick Soviet? I've always been interested in it. The Limerick Soviet, well, if you would like, there is... Do I have a copy of it? No. Of course, I should have a copy of it somewhere, but I don't. There's an entire section in my book, Manny Man Does Revolutionary Ireland, all about the Limerick Soviet, which is a really interesting point in Irish history. In 1919, for 2 weeks, the city of Limerick went on shut down. It was kind of closed off by the British forces, and because of the Irish War of Independence, and the people of Limerick, having seen what happened in Russia only 2 years prior, and of course was then ongoing with the Civil War, that they were inspired by that and set up their own little socialist Soviet in Limerick. It didn't last too long, but one thing I found quite interesting was how there were a lot of little socialist uprisings throughout the Irish War of Independence, and they were shut down by both British forces and Irish nationalists, because I think the Irish nationalists were like, no, we want to control, we want an established Irish Republic to control this, not the working class with their dirty hands. And then, of course, I think the British Empire were worried that if Ireland had this massive socialist uprising, that could spread to Liverpool, could spread to Manchester, could spread to Birmingham, and all of a sudden you'll have all these massive socialist uprisings across Great Britain, which they wouldn't like, because an empire crumbles best from within. Let's see. Communism is not atheist, but they refuse to use religion as a way of controlling the population. Yeah, that's interesting. I think that's a very interesting one, actually, because, yeah, you don't specifically have to be an atheist to be socialist or to be communist. I I think the kind of totalitarian regime of what was the Soviet Union, particularly under Joseph Stalin, was very anti-religion. And I mean, given a lot of what a lot of churches have done over, centuries, it's not necessarily it's not a completely shocking thing, and particularly as well, the amount of wealth that various churches hold. That would have been an understandable one for a communist regime to confiscate. But then I think the United States really went on heavy with how atheistic it was, and it became this thing of Christian versus atheist, and communism equaled atheism, and that had to be destroyed because they were against God and all this kind of stuff. And it's just classic tribalism, classic. We're going to equate this with something else so that because arguing against communism is one thing, but arguing against God, all of a sudden people are, oh, well, if they're arguing against God, let's not even think about their economic suggestions, because they're against God. Yeah, it's fun. Was Superman a communist dictator? Well, I think there was a story, Red Sun, which was a what if scenario. What if Kal-El had landed in the Soviet Union? That's an interesting point there. Catholic communists view the teachings of Jesus as socialist in nature. The whole carpenter thing is also important to them. Absolutely. And interestingly enough, that's from Sirloin of Ice, or Sirloin of Ice. I don't know how to pronounce it. Sirloin of Ice. That's what it is, I think. Yeah. But yeah, there's my great uncle, who was he was a priest. His name was Father James McDyer. Maybe I should do a video on him sometime, because he is a fascinating character. And he was a communist. He was born in 1910. He grew up during the Irish War of Independence and Civil War, so he saw his own country tear itself apart. And then he was a priest. So he became a priest because he wanted to help people. And he was in London during the Blitz. He was a priest in London during the Blitz. And then he begged to go back to Ireland after the war so that he could go back and help people in Ireland. And he set up this community. Well, he didn't set it up. I mean, the community was there, but he helped establish a lot of cooperative programs in a little wonderful place called Glencullenkill out on the west coast of Donegal, and it's beautiful. Go and visit it. And he tried so much of setting up cooperative enterprises, where all of the profits would go back to generating more for the people of the community. And when he went there was no running water. There was no piped water. Everything was from wells. There was no electricity. And he pushed to get those. He set up he had them build a wee community hall. And he, one of his lasting things is he set up helped set up the Folk Village, which was this beautiful little tourist attraction to all these different cottages from different points in history. You've got a 17th century cottage, 18th century, 19th century, 20th century, and it's amazing, just going in and seeing. But he was a communist, and his view of it was, well, the teachings of Jesus are totally socialist, where Jesus walks into the temple and there's a whole pile of people trading in there. And he's like, "What is going on, guys?" And he tears it all down. He's all about the people. He's a man of the people. Hold on, actually, do I have? I do. Here's one I prepared earlier. Now, this is part of a speech that Father McDyer gave in 1966, and this little part of the speech is so resonant today. Like, this sounds like something that Bernie Sanders would be saying now. But wait till you hear this, and I'll read it in his voice as well. I portrayed Father James McDyer in a play called "I Would Walk These Fields Again" by Guy Lejeune, and so I will do that. It is a terrifying reflection in our world that the manufacture of many of its major and essential commodities are in the hands of an ever-shrinking group of corporations. It is equally terrifying that the power and wealth of some of these is so great that they give governments occasion to pause. And the more multinational and powerful they become, the better their position to influence the policy of not just one nation, but the policy of a group of nations. The vast bulk of the world's wealth reposes in the hands of a tiny minority. Their call is for more growth, larger turnover, and larger profits to satisfy the insatiable longing of the shareholders. To attain this growth, the worker is subjected to machine, and automation dictates redundancy. The consumer is constantly hammered with the call to spend, 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 and we have flooded the world with cheap plastic and unnecessary gadgetry while neglecting the good and solid things in life. 1966. And you can just as easily hear, it is a terrifying reflection in our world that the manufacture of many of its major and essential commodities are in the hands of an ever-shrinking group of corporations. You know? Bernie Sanders would have been saying that back then. Oh, wow. Super chat. Thanks for the lovely words on my hometown, Glen. Hello to Glen. Glen Columkill. It is a fine place. I love Glen Columkill. But yeah, those are the words of a Christian communist right there. And it's amazing how how resonant those words are, and so much of what he was talking about, 50, 60 years ago, it's just so resonant today. But that's Father James McDyer. You should really check him out. I'd be very tempted to actually make a video about him because he's a fascinating character. And he was my grandmother's uncle. So he's in the blood somewhere. Let's see. Poland partition was one thing, but nations today will never be happy with their share of partitioned land. Noah Gibson, very interesting words. That's something that I look at a lot when people are looking at geopolitics, when people are looking at borders, because borders change all the time. Borders are not set in stone. Usually, occasionally they are. Like the Pyrenees or the Alps sometimes can be very solid borders, or rivers can sometimes be very solid borders. But still, like, just look at a map of Europe alone. And what's the last border change that has happened in Europe? Arguably, I suppose Crimea, that is now technically part of Russia again. And then before that would be, I suppose, would probably be the breakup of Yugoslavia, and that was during the 90s. But like the difference between 1900s Europe and 2000 is completely different. It's not completely different, but very different. borders change, and um, and more often than not, they don't change peacefully, unfortunately, too. But yeah. And no Irish accent, please. Don't maul me, Dubliners. Soviets were barely atheist compared to Ataturk. Mhm. Independent Kashmir would be an interesting solution. Soviet imperialism and unregulated capitalism ruined the Eastern Europe. Look at Yugoslavia. Yeah. Now, I'm going to be honest, I don't know all of the ins and outs of a lot of the economics. It's not an area that I have studied in detail, but it is definitely something I want to do a video on later. So I look forward to researching that. Do you have any other hobbies other than history? I have a load of hobbies. I love what do I love? I'm surrounded by things that I love. I love watching movies. You can see on my shelf just there, that is the Lord of the Rings Blu-ray trilogy, and there's the Hobbit trilogy as well. But there's the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and every year, at some point, I do a marathon of the extended editions, Lord of the Rings, and I have done that ever since you have been able to, since 2004, when the Return of the King extended edition came out. I got it that Christmas 2004, and I did the full day marathon before New Year's Eve. So like in that interim period, I I did the marathon. So I have done the extended edition marathon every year since you've been able to. So that is, would that be a hobby? I mean, loving Lord of the Rings, loving Tolkien, I suppose is a hobby. But yeah, I'm a massive Tolkien fan. So much so that we incorporated Tolkien into our wedding. Like the table names and stuff were like they weren't Mordor. Didn't have Mordor. Didn't want to sit anybody at Mordor, but we had like the Shire, Rivendell, Gondor, Rohan, and Erebor. Yeah, it was fun. I love Tolkien. And he was devoutly Catholic, compared to what do you call it, C.S. Lewis, who was he Presbyterian? Well, he was definitely Protestant, but I don't know, was he Presbyterian or Church of Ireland? He was from Belfast, but he went through a stint of atheism, and it's really interesting because, well, I mean, obviously he then went on to write the Chronicles of Narnia, which is this super Christian allegory. But he wrote this great one called what's it called? Something Papers. Is it Papers? So the Screwtape Letters. The Screwtape Letters. Excuse me. The Screwtape Letters, and they are letters of advice from Uncle Screwtape. Who is Uncle Screwtape? Uncle Screwtape is a demon who is writing letters to his nephew, who is a subordinate demon who is trying to tempt souls to turn away from God. And it's a very interesting it's a very interesting perspective, because I suppose C.S. Lewis lost his faith and then rediscovered his faith, and it was really interesting. It's very funny. I've listened to it on audiobook, and it was read by John Cleese, and it's very entertaining. Wow. Let's see. How do you identify a nationality? Because in the 800, it was considered the language, and from now it's considered the culture. Yeah. It is an interesting one. Because I mean that's a big question that we even face in Ireland. We actually have there's a saying in Ireland, um, an old Irish proverb, which is um, "Cheer gan chan, cheer gan changa, cheer gan anam," which means a country without a language is a country without a soul. And and of course here I am speaking in English, um, because England was very effective at colonizing, um, and the language was one of the grand colonial successes, colonial exports of Britain. It is the lingua franca of the world. Um, but yeah, I mean, it is an interesting thing. Just where does one draw nationality, and where does one, because it's, I mean, it is nice to be able to identify with a culture, with um, but at the same time, where does one draw the line? Because within those cultures, within those cultures, there are subcultures. For example, in Ireland, um, like there is a subculture in Dublin compared to the rest of Ireland. In Donegal, there is a subculture there. In Northern Ireland, there are various subcultures. Um, in like there are similarities and there are overlaps, but there are differences as well. Um, and it is an interesting thing. Where does one draw the line? Like take Belgium for example, who speaks French, who speaks German, who speaks Dutch. Do you speak Flemish there as well? Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's um, a lot of a lot of things. But I suppose that was the whole point of a lot of the uprisings in the lead up to World War I, where um, you had Austria-Hungary, which was being run by a parliament in Vienna and a parliament in Budapest, one speaking German, one speaking Hungarian, and yet more than half of the country were Slavic speakers. Where you had what was now Czech and Slovak and Croatian and all across what Yugoslavia. So I think that translates to just Southern Slavic. Um, but I suppose nowadays the whole idea of a nation state is changing, and um, it is an interesting one because unfortunately nation states and then can evolve into nationalism, and nationalism can get very toxic, as World War I showed, as World War II showed. And there has been a massive rise in nationalism again, and it's it's interesting just that people um, people can throw their weight behind, well, I am from this country, therefore this says a lot about me. In some ways it's almost like Zodiac. It's almost like, oh well, I'm a Taurus and that is such a Taurus thing to say. And yet, we just feed into all of the stereotype, or we feed it into all of the positive reinforcement. So it's like, oh, that's such an Irish thing to say. But then it turns out loads of people in other countries say similar things or do similar things, but we're just like, oh, that's so Irish. So Irish. Oh, that is such an Irish thing to do. We Ireland are just constantly self-deprecating. That's what we do. That's part of our culture. And yet you go to a lot of other countries and they do that too. I mean, it is a cultural thing, but at the same time, we sometimes take ownership and it's like, this is our thing. And it's like, is it though? And not only that, but we're so culturally diverse inside. And I think people who try to freeze culture, who try to say, no, this is the culture and it cannot change, you're holding back the tide. Cultures always change, you know? uh, like the culture between now and 100 years ago has changed, and it will continue to change for worse or better. um, preferably for better. But you can't hold back the tide either, unless you shut the borders and become Japan for 400 years, where they remained in the 16th century for quite some time. Um, let's see. What else we got? 90s heightened the nationalism surge. Was it the 90s though? I would say it would be more the 2000s, or at least, the late 2000s. I mean, I would, um, I would look to 9/11 as a big one, particularly for the likes of American nationalism. Just that, and American nationalism can be very toxic. Um, and not that I have anything against the United States, but there are some problems, and particularly with a lot of the nationalism that goes with it. Patriotism is one thing. Patriotism, yay USA, yay I'm from USA. I would be patriotic towards Ireland, um, but I wouldn't be so much so nationalistic regarding Ireland. I mean, it's it's all wonderfully philosophical. It's all wonderfully philosophical. Let's see. John, will you do a video on either the Emmett Rebellion or the 1798 Rebellion? Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they're on the list. The 1798 Rebellion is one of Ireland's many classic sad failures. There's a great story about Wolfe Tone. How much of it is true is another question. But they say that, well, he wanted a soldier's death by firing squad, but they denied him that. They said, no, you're gonna be hanged. And so he says fine, and he slit his throat in the prison. And one of the stories is that they tried to actually suture him back up so that they could hang him. But the orderly who stitched him up is like, right, yeah, he will survive, but if he ever speaks again, he will die. To which Wolfe Tone says, "So be it." And such is the story. I love the story. But I mean, how much of it is true is another question. Let's see. Show. Wait, is Ireland still like homogenous, or do you have other races there, like Sikhs and blacks? Ireland it's predominantly white, but we do have a lot of people from a lot of cultures, a lot of races. Particularly, Ireland diversified very much in the 2000s. There was a lot of immigration into Ireland around that time when our economy was doing better, and so a lot of people from West Africa, a lot of people from Eastern Europe, a lot of people from all over came to Ireland, and so now there are communities of people, some integrated more than others, but at the same time, they're Irish. You've got in the same way with a lot of places, like say with North America, where you'll have the first generation, the immigrants themselves, but then their children integrate, and that's the thing. Now you've got young people, and not so much even children anymore, but you've got young adults now, of many different races, who are Irish, of various descent, but they're Irish. They speak with Irish accents. They can speak the Irish language because they probably grew up learning it in school like everybody else. But yeah, and it's really nice because I mean I remember in the 90s, like when I was a child, it wasn't as much of a diverse place, and like in a school there would maybe be one or two people of color in that school, and everybody else would be white and Catholic. Um, so it's only been in the last 20 years that Ireland has really begun to see a lot of diversification, and all the better because people, it adds more flavor to the world than to just sit and go, nope, this is our culture and never shall it change, even though it has changed for centuries. And people come, people go, and cultural appropriation, which, as the one of my favorite YouTubers, Lindsay Ellis, says, is a neutral term. Cultural appropriation. It's neither a positive nor a negative thing. The big question is who is doing the appropriation, and what the kind of power levels of, is the imperialist, is the conqueror taking it and just making it their own. But cultural appropriation is how culture evolves and changes. um and like, I mean, like, take Irish culture for example. Irish traditional music, um the the style of piano playing in Irish traditional music stems from ragtime in the 1910s, because the first people who went over to the United States and recorded it with session musicians who were these ragtime pianist players. So they played and they're and so that style of piano playing, and then those records and recordings came back to Ireland, and people in Ireland were listening. Oh well, if that's the way that it was recorded, then maybe that has to be the way that it's done. And so that style of piano playing is a core part of Irish traditional music, but it came from ragtime. So that's how it all. Like, we pick and we choose. Like, take rock music for example. It came from or rock and roll. It came from jazz. It came from blues. It came, and again, and um, a lot of black music, in North America, a lot of that music, and then the white man took it, and like, say, Led Zeppelin for example, where they take a blues riff and then copyright it, and it's like, and I suppose now it's kind of come full circle, where with Marvin Gaye's family, who are like copywriting grooves. It's like, oh, it sounds a little bit like that, but that's how, like, music is a fine example actually of how, of cultural evolution and cultural change, and taking this thing from this and putting it in here, and then that becomes its own thing, and it's fascinating. Let's see. All American music comes from West Africa. Grand Bardic Couture. All American music. I wouldn't say all American music, but there's a lot of American music is heavily influenced by African music. Some American music, like, say, bluegrass, for example, is comes from Irish traditional music, where you would have had a lot of Irish trad players going to the States in the 19th century, and it became bluegrass, and then it became its own thing, and then that eventually then evolved into country and country western, and then country western came back with a vengeance to Ireland, and now Ireland has its own. um, I'm a massive country fan, but Ireland, as a country, is a massive country fan, because it's all about farming and stuff for the most part. But yeah, stop the world, it'll let me off. Mm-mm. Um, let's see. I mean, most of the music had its roots with the griot. I am not familiar with the griot. I need to educate myself. Um, as an April Fool's joke, could you do the history of the Kaiserreich universe? Well, it's funny. I did toy one time of doing I did toy with doing a video about the Metal Gear Solid history universe, but it takes me so long to make any videos because the illustrations are so intensive that I kind of thought um, that I kind of thought that if I'm going to put a load of time and effort into making a video, that I would make it about actual history as opposed to fictional history. But I do love alternate history concepts. I do love these kind of what if scenarios. It's quite fascinating to think. Snake. Is Snake your profile picture? It is. Yes, I am a massive Metal Gear Solid fan. Actually, any eagle-eyed viewers, let's see, can you see where? Here is the entire Metal Gear Solid collection, from Snake Eater, Portable Ops, Metal Gear Solid 5, Metal Gear Solid, Metal Gear HD collection, Metal Gear Solid 4. It's all there. And that was chronological order. And of course, you've got Metal Gear and Metal Gear 2 in there as well, which are available on the HD collection. So it's all there. But yeah. Funnily enough, I think it was Metal Gear Solid was kind of partially instrumental in getting me into history, because the whole background of the Cold War in Snake Eater, when I was a teenager, I played that one. I was about 15 or 16 years old. And that was, in a lot of ways, my inroad into the Cold War was Metal Gear Solid 3. And so I suppose, because then with Metal Gear Solid 4 on the PS3, you had the Metal Gear Solid database. And I was fascinated by that and seeing where the fictional stuff, but then the real stuff came in. And I learned so much about real world history from the Metal Gear Solid database when I was I would have been about 19 when that came out, 18 or 19 when that came out. But it's funny, yeah, like when I think about it, Metal Gear Solid was a massive thing. And it's funny now going back to it, having bathed in world history, and now just seeing how like, was it last year or the year before, I played through them all in chronological order just to see how they played. And some of it is quite juvenile, like the way that Snake reacts, particularly in Snake Eater, like where he's just so juvenile with regards how he reacts to women. But I mean, I suppose that's the grand thing about video game evolution as well, is I think video games are less about, oh, look, a beautiful woman in ridiculously impractical clothing. And now it's like, no. Women are people too. They're not just objects to gaze upon. Let's see. My gateway drug to the Cold War was the Doctor Strangelove movie. Yes, that's a great movie. Starring not starring, but featuring a very, very young James Earl Jones in that. It's a great movie if anyone has seen it. Was it How I Learned to Stop Panicking and How I Stopped Panicking and Learned to Love the Bomb or something like that? It's a great film. I used to make my own Metal Gear on RPG Maker XP. What is RPG Maker XP? That sounds fascinating. I don't know what that is, but what it reminds me of is 3D Movie Maker, which I was a massive fan of when I was a kid. Has anyone here? I do not know the age range of this group in here, but if anyone is in their late 20s, early 30s, you've probably played 3D Movie Maker. That was on Windows 95, and I played that game so much. Funnily enough, I made a Metal Gear Solid film in 3D Movie Maker when I was about 11 years old, because, and at that point I hadn't even played the game. I watched my friend George play it, and yeah, um, this is a big modding community to this day. There, oh yeah, it was funny. About 10 years ago, I discovered the modding community, and I downloaded a whole pile of mods for it, and I made what will probably be my last film on 3D Movie Maker. It was What was cool about it was somebody had made the entire model of the Super Mario 64 foyer in Peach's Castle as an object that you could move around. So what that meant was you could make it a massive prop, but you could rotate it whatever way you want. So you could have completely 100% dynamic camera angles. So even though the camera was fixed, you would just move the background around the camera, and then just, it was very time consuming, because any camera move, not only did you have to move the set, but you also had to move your figures as well. If you don't know what it is, Google 3D Movie Maker. By today's standards, it is very rudimentary, but it taught me a lot about using computers. It taught me a lot about sound design. It taught me a lot about a lot of basic filmmaking techniques and language I learned from 3D Movie Maker. Let's see. Didn't the Troubles really ramp up in violence when Gaddafi gave everyone guns? No, I don't know all the specifics of that, but I think there was certainly weapons that came from Gaddafi, and where there are weapons, there is war, or at least underlying potential. Chrono Trigger. I still haven't played Chrono Trigger. I need to play Chrono Trigger. But speaking of video game playthroughs, I've actually done a couple of video game playthroughs. I'm not sure if you have seen them, but over on my other channel, John D. Ruddy Does Stuff, I have done a playthrough of, what have I done so far? Kirby's Dream Land on the Game Boy, which was the first game I ever completed. But also I've done Sonic the Hedgehog, and my favorite game on the Sega Mega Drive, Rocket Knight Adventures, which is so good. So go, if you haven't already, go and subscribe to that channel and check them out. And I've recorded one on Streets of Rage, but I want to ultimately do a whole pile of game throughs. I've been thinking of maybe getting into doing some live streams of video games as well. We shall see how much time I have or not, because I already have so much to do. Have you watched anime? If so, what's your favorite anime? I have watched very limited anime, very, very limited anime, and I haven't watched like series. Put it this way: the only anime series that I probably watched is probably Pokemon and Digimon, and that's probably low grade anime. I remember one time I was walking with my wife, my fiance at the time. We were walking through a comic book shop, and I ill-advisedly asked a little too loud, because I was just walking past it, I saw a Naruto thing, and I was like, "What is Naruto about?" And this random guy who was walking past, "Well, if you ask my opinion," and I was like, "Nobody asked your opinion." But no, I haven't seen. Sees this comment. He has to drink water. Well, I've just drank water anyway. Do I still have to drink it again? I'll drink some more. Thanks, Bob Bills. Yeah, Digimon. But series-wise, I haven't watched a lot of anime. Films, I have watched Ghost in the Shell, which is very cool. Again, you can see so much of the DNA of Metal Gear Solid in that film. But then on top of that, there's also Akira, which is one of my favorite films. It's I have it up on the shelf. I love Akira. It's phenomenal. I still haven't read the manga, but I love Akira. It is every so often I'll put it on again. It literally took me about 10 times watching it and about 10 years of digesting it to finally understand what happens at the end. The last time I watched it, I remember it just got to the end. I was like, I understand this now, more or less. But Akira is so good. Yes, cyberpunk, very much so. And then I've seen some of the Studio Ghibli stuff as well. The likes of my wife is a massive fan, so she has introduced me to all of the Studio Ghibli stuff. So My Neighbor Totoro, Spirited Away, Howl's Moving Castle. What's it called? Princess Mononoke. I have seen Ponyo independently of my wife. Although Ponyo isn't as good, but Princess Mononoke is beautiful. It's a heavier one, but I really enjoyed it. I love Spirited Away. Actually, last Halloween, me and my wife, we dressed up as what's her name? Chitara? Is that her name? Chitara? As in Thundercats, Chitara? She also called Chitara? Something like that. The little girl in Spirited Away, and I dressed up as No Face, which you can actually see is hiding behind. That was the mask that I used. And it was really cool because it was above my head. And so I had a big long cloak, and the costume was about 8 feet tall. And it was so cool. I was walking around Derry. Derry has a massive Halloween festival every year. And we wandered around, and people were just like, oh, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. What's that? Will you ever do a Minecraft Let's Play on John D. Ruddy? It does stuff. It may cost 24 but PC, but it's worth it. I don't have it on the PC, but I have it on the PS4, and it's definitely one that I want to do because it's something I suppose I've wanted to share with people for some time. And it's still a work in progress, and it is going to remain a work in progress for quite some time. But I have been constructing the entirety of Hyrule from Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, and I have built a lot of it already. There's still a lot to go, but I have built a lot of it. I have built so I definitely want to do this. So if you really want to see that, go and subscribe to that channel now. John D. Ruddy does stuff. I have built Castletown. I've built the Hyrule Castle. I've built Lon Lon Ranch. I built Kakariko Village. I have built the Zora River and Zora's Domain. I've done the outline of the sacred pool or whatever you call it at the back. I've done the Kokiri Forest. Done the entire Deku Tree inside and out. I have done the Lost Woods, and I am currently in the process of finishing the Forest Temple. I've also built the Shadow Temple. So the Shadow Temple and the Forest Temple are complete, and it is. I've put way too many hours into that game. I haven't played it now in ages, but yeah, it is. I love it. I love it. So that's definitely something. But yeah, just to give you a little update on some of the things that I have been doing. So obviously, my next video, as I had announced previously, is the Kings and Queens of England. It's probably going to be a 5-parter because there's a lot of kings and queens. But I always been a Lincoln Ruto shipper. Yeah, them's were the days. I always loved the noise whenever you picked up Ruto and threw her. That's always quite, or the sound of the door opening and closing inside Lord Jabba Jabba. Um, but what happened to Wales? Well, Wales will be included as well, as will Scotland, as will Ireland, because those kings and queens were monarchs of England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales in various points of history. But the reason why I say England is because I don't want to say Great Britain because it's inaccurate, because I'm going to be starting way back. The reason why I keep looking up here, I have a big massive poster of the entire timeline or the entire genealogy and lineage of the kings and queens of England. So obviously, as the video progresses, I will be expanding the kingdom, because I mean, technically, the first ones aren't even kings of the entirety of England, So we'll get there. We'll get there. But I've written most of it. It's funny because I wrote the initial script, the first section, about 4 or 5 years ago, and I never got around to making it. But then in more recent times, I sat down and then wrote from Henry VIII up until Queen Elizabeth. Now I haven't written for Queen Elizabeth yet, but yeah. So it'll be a long one, and I may do other videos in between. So I might do the part one now, and then maybe do like the Korean War, for example, is a big one that's been on my list, or the space race. I really want to do a video about the Stonewall riots as well. I think that might be a shorter one to produce as well, which might be good. Oh, I could do that one in time for Pride Month. That would be good. But yeah, so there's loads of ones like that. Say potato. There you go. Or as we call them here, spuds or purdies. Hey John, have you heard of AI Dungeon? It's AI generated text adventure game. No, I haven't. I mean, now, do Welsh monarchs still exist, or did they die out? Oh, I don't know all of the ins and outs. I know there were princes of Wales, who held various castles around Wales, but ultimately, I think they were conquered. I think it was Edward the Longshanks who essentially built an entire network of castles around Wales, including Carnarvon Castle, and that that was that was England's way of controlling Wales. And anyone in Wales who tried to rise up would then be sorted out by those castles, who were filled with English soldiers. Yeah, poor Wales. I went to Wales on my mini moon, my mini honeymoon, back in September, and I loved it. That was also part of the reason why I want to do a video about that history, because I was in loads of castles, but I was in Pembroke Castle, which was cool because that's where Henry VII was born, the beginning of the Tudors, which I thought was very cool. That's also where what's his? Well, he wasn't from there, but he was the Earl of Pembroke. It was Strongbow, Richard de Clare, who was a Norman, who was the first Norman king of Ireland. So yeah, there's loads of links, loads of really interesting things. But no, I was in Carnarvon Castle. I was in it starts with a C. Conway Castle. Loads of castles, very cool. Because Carnarvon Castle is where the Prince of Wales is traditionally crowned nowadays. So like Prince Charles was crowned there. Also, speaking of crowns, and that's also another thing was in late 2019, I binge watched all of The Crown and loved it. So that was another reason what spurred me back into making videos about kings and queens of England. You should do a video about Hitler's rise to power. Yes, I really do. I really want to do that. Because that's one thing I think my World War II video doesn't do justice in the slightest. But then again, it's a video about World War II. It's not about Hitler's rise to power. Yeah. What about the San Francisco White Knights riot? That could be done. Basically, funny mustache man fails at art. Well, I think there's a little bit more intricacies to that, but yeah. So that's my one of my many upcoming videos. I actually put up a poll on my Patreon account, so there was a choice between that and Space Race, and I can't remember the third option now, but that was the one that won out, was Kings and Queens of England Part 1. So if you want to be part of those decision makings, if you want to be part of the decision making, you can by supporting me on Patreon. It's patreon.com/John D. Ruddy. You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram. If you want to see a photo of me dressed up as No Face from Spirited Away, you can go and find it on Instagram. Let's see what else. This has been keeping me very busy at the moment. I have been making maps, loads of maps. These are maps of Dublin, which I have been producing for the Five Lamps Festival. And they are a lot of fun. They're stupidly detailed. I have literally drawn every building from Dublin Port up to Phibsborough, more or less. So the maps will be Map Men, great channel. I love Map Men. If go and check out Map Men, they're very entertaining. Map Men. But yeah, so these maps I have an intention of mapping the entire city centre of Dublin at some stage, but at the time being, I am working on a couple of different areas of North Inner City Dublin for the Five Lamps Festival, which was sadly postponed due to COVID-19, as was the world. The world has been postponed due to COVID-19, but it was one of the many things that were, postponed. It's time to learn about geography now. Yes. So that's what I've been doing. Also, I produced, you can go over to Instagram to Block, which is BLOCK. No, just BLOC. There you go. It's in the chat. Block. On Instagram. They are an Irish language entertainment show for TG Car, which is the Irish language TV channel here in Ireland. And Block have been producing some wonderful content throughout this COVID-19 pandemic. And they asked me to produce some toilet roll art. And so that's what I did. I produced some toilet roll art. And let's see, actually, I have them in a bowl here. I will reveal only the ones that have already been shown. So this one, for example, Corona bottle, but toilet roll. What else? This was Block. This is their logo. Can't really see it with. Yeah, that's meant to be white, but when it's lit up from the back, I don't know. Will that work? No. What else? We have a wonderful gas mask for purposes. Let's see. Oh, this one. I discovered this. Toilet roll tubes are amazing for sculpting. Made this little head, little kind of Easter Island head. If you just run them underwater, and you can sculpt them into all sorts of really interesting shapes. And then it dries. It dries back into solid cardboard. It's really cool. But yeah, go check those out on Block. I think it's Block TV. And then what else? What else have we been doing? Oh yes, some of you may have seen. I've been posting some of them onto the YouTube channel, but I've been doing daily quizzes, or mostly daily quizzes, to help people who are being homeschooled at the moment during the pandemic. It's little quizzes to go along with all my history videos, so you can. So if you go over to my Facebook page, John D. Ruddy, actor, artist, educator, you can find all of these quizzes, which just adds an entirely new what's the word? An entirely new dimension to my videos. COVID-19 symptoms may include cabin fever, online classes, closing of good restaurants in town, Starbucks closing, less traffic, and an increase in online content being consumed. Yes, absolutely. Ooh, this is very creaky. Yes, that's very true. I'm going to be amazed at the massive influx of podcasts, of people going, I'm going to produce a podcast. Funnily enough, I've come up with an idea for a podcast, which I'm not gonna reveal right now, but I came up with an idea for a podcast, which is pop culture related, which is exciting because I tend not to do too much pop culture stuff. But yeah, this is super pop culture. What is the history of Blarney Castle in Cork? Definitely spelled that wrong. Yes, there's no I in it. It's Blarney, Blarney. I don't know actually all of the history around Blarney Castle, and its alleged Blarney stone, or its legendary Blarney stone, which is this stone up at the top, on the top of the castle tower, where you actually have to reach in underneath and kiss it. But I don't think they're going to be doing that in the age of COVID-19. But yeah. Let's see. Anything else? Anything else? Yeah, so you can check those out. But yeah, it's a really interesting and bizarre time that we're living in right now. And if you're watching back on this later, what you can do is you can go back to the start of the video, and you can see how dark it has gotten since we've been speaking. But any last questions? I will take 4 more questions, and then I'm going to call it a day. So let's get a good one to start. No? If you're not... Oh, well, okay, I'll take this one up here. Have you heard of Minecraft Earth and Minecraft Dungeons, and are you planning on getting them? No, unfortunately, I have very limited time to play video games, and Minecraft, as it is, already consumes a lot of my time. So I don't think I'll be able to give the time for that, for those extra ones. But yeah, what time is it there? It is 8:25 in the evening. Yes, Blarney Castle is a big purple and yellow castle shaped as a big plush dinosaur. Ha! Barney Castle. Have you considered, this is from Isidore Skogberg, have you considered doing a video about the kings and queens of England in the same style as your video about US presidents? Yes, I've literally been talking about that. That's exactly what I'm going to do. Except it's going to be a 5-parter. Could be 6 parts. I'm not sure yet, but it's probably almost definitely going to be at least. Well, it's definitely going to be at least 5 parts, because there's a lot more kings and queens and a lot longer time period to go through. Let's see. So that was. I'll not count that one, seeing as I literally was talking about that. Let's see. Is there a definitive piece of Irish literature for non-Irish readers to better understand the Irish experience? The one that's really springing to mind. Excuse me. isn't exactly a piece of Irish literature, but it's a piece of Irish media, which was produced by an English company. But we'll not get into that. But Father Ted. Father Ted is an Irish sitcom from the 1990s, and it is about an Irish. It is about a couple of Irish priests who live on an island off the coast of Ireland, and there is so much of Irish humor that you can get from Father Ted. There's a lot of Irish stereotypes, a lot of Irish archetypes that can be found in Father Ted. Now, unfortunately, one of the writers of that show has since become a real online douche canoe with regards things that he says about trans people, which is really lousy. But the show itself, if one can separate from him, hashtag death of the author, you can watch that show and you'll get a lot. But I mean, there is also, take James Joyce, Dubliners is a very good one. They say if Dublin were to be destroyed tomorrow, then you could rebuild Dublin brick by brick based on the works of James Joyce alone. It's a very good one. You also have, so it captures kind of 1910s, 1900s, 1910s Dublin very well. Of course, there is Ulysses, but Ulysses is a big, dense one to try and get through. Dubliners is much more, it's a collection of short stories, so it's much more accessible. Also, Angela's Ashes is a good one. Frank McCourt. Else. The plays of Sean O'Casey are very good for kind of early 20th century Ireland as well. If you want something really crazy and really fun and really dark and very Irish in that way too, is The Butcher Boy by Pat McCabe. It's based in 1960s rural town, small town Ireland. And I was actually in a play which was based on the same story, but written by Pat McCabe as well. Pat's a legend. But it captures small town Ireland, judgmental small town Ireland of 1960s, and mental health, and a lot of stuff, a lot of issues. Very, very, it's very funny. It's crazy. Like it's about this young fella called Francie Brady who goes on off all these mad adventures. He's a kid, but a lot of things happen in his life, adventures and misadventures, and check it out. It's fantastic. So there's a couple of ones. Let's see. Also, do check out Griot Culture. Yes, I'm going to write this down. Griot Culture. I'm going to check that out. Thank you very much, Malkadon. Is that Malkadon or Malsadon? I'm not sure. How do you think the USSR and the world be different if Trotsky took control and not Stalin? Ooh, very interesting. Now, my knowledge kind of goes mainly up until the end of the revolution, and my knowledge of the Russian Civil War isn't as detailed, but from my understanding of it, Stalin was a terrible person. Plain and simple. I think the Soviet Union would have been a very different place without Joseph Stalin. Like, even if you look at later leaders like Khrushchev and Brezhnev, yeah, they weren't perfect, absolutely not. But Stalin was not a good person. I know, newsflash, Joseph Stalin was not a good person. But I wouldn't be able to speculate on all the ins and outs of it because I don't know all the ins and outs of it. But it would have been very different. And unfortunately, I think that universe would have been a better one than the one we got with regards Stalin and the things that he did to his own people. Let's see, 2 more questions. If arrived to Ireland, I would be disappointment if I don't get a greeting by the Morgan herself. Ah, the Morgan. She is really interesting. Yeah, Malcadon. Cool. The Morgan is really cool. She's the Celtic goddess of death and war, and often takes the form of a crow or a raven. Very, very cool. Or the Morrigu. There's loads of different versions of her. Let's see. One more. Let's go. Hey, Mr. John, in your POV, did the German Empire start World War One or Austro-Hungarian Empire did it? Well, I mean, technically it was... Well, I mean, let's see, it was Yugoslav nationalists that shot Franz Ferdinand. So Austria-Hungary went to war with Serbia. So technically one could argue that it was, like, I mean, just by the chronology of it, technically it was. however, that was a war between Austria-Hungary and Serbia. Perhaps, I mean, obviously, they would have. Well, nobody knew the carnage that would have been that would become World War One. But Austria-Hungary began a war with Serbia, or Austria-Hungary didn't begin a world war, and I think that's why more blame lay with Germany, like particularly like with the Treaty of Versailles and whatnot, because I think Germany held the cards. With Germany had the ability to not let it escalate. Germany had the ability to say, okay, we could go to war here and start a whole new thing, or we could not let this get any further. Say, for example, and I'll give him this. I'll give him this. Back in January, when all eyes were on Trump and Iran, and he didn't go to war with Iran. I'm going to give him that much. I'm going to give him credit. At the very least, he did not go to war with Iran. And I'm kind of proud of him for not doing that, because he very much could have. Very much could have. And in that same vein, Germany could have not gone to war with Russia and France, and they could have chosen not to do that and try and deal with things in a more diplomatic way, but they didn't. And I think that's why more of the blame tends to land on Germany for World War One, or for it escalating to that point. Let's see, one more question. Belfast on fire, greens or oranges? I don't like. I don't understand the question. What is that music called? That music is called Bodega, and I love it. It's just so chill, and it just sits in the background, and it's my go-to music for live streams and for any of my little videos, because it's just chill, just sits in the background. But yeah, it's called Bodega. I'm not sure who it's by, but you can. It's on the YouTube library of royalty-free music. So there it is. It's called Bodega. Okay. Bodega. Yes, that is correct. So, folks, that has been the March live stream. Let me just double check before we go anywhere, because Patreon supporters have guaranteed abilities to ask questions. Now, I laid it upon them at the very last minute, so nobody has responded, unfortunately, but there have been a lot of questions here, a lot of questions asked. So, what games you got in the background? A lot of ones. You're going to have to find out another time because I'm going to call it a day now. So, folks, thank you so much for calling in here, saying hello, asking loads of questions. I hope you are washing your hands. I hope you are not touching your face like I have been touching my face intermittently during this. The streams will continue to be Patreon. There will possibly be an occasional, but there'll be very occasional, just in general on YouTube. But if you want to be here live in the live streams, become a patron on Patreon. You can donate $1 a month, and that'll keep me going, and it helps me massively. Every little bit allows me to keep making history videos, allows me to keep making as much creative things as I can. So you can support me on patreon.com/John D. Ruddy. And you can also follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And go and check out my other channel, John D. Ruddy Does Stuff. And we'll get there. Can you do a video on the Yugoslav wars in the 90s? Yes. Yes, I can. In the future. It's on the list. It definitely is on the list. Folks, I've really enjoyed this. I've really enjoyed this. This is good. This is good. This is good. This is getting awkward now. Okay, I'm really going to go this time. Let's see. Are you sure you want to end your stream? Yes, I am sure. How sure am I? I am. Good luck, everyone. Be safe.